we tend to think, oh, well, if we just research a problem long enough, we will find solutions. Well, no, the solutions to problems happen when you do what you can do today, so that you can do what you have to do tomorrow. So you do one bit after another, after another, after another, after another.
Welcome to the Break Free Podcast. I am your host, David Mancilla. We're starting a new year, and I'm so excited to have this podcast recording with Gene. He's one of the people in the world that is changing this world for a better place, despite all the current situations that are around us. Gene, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you, David. It's great to be here.
Gene, for the audience, can you tell me where do you live and what do you do for a living?
So I live primarily in Boston, and for a living, I run a company that I started 26 years ago called World Energy. And World Energy is focused on driving the frontier of clean energy, and we do that in ways that continue to evolve. Most recently, we've been developing sustainable aviation fuel, and that is a fuel that enables us to begin to find ways to fly from point A to point B in a decarbonized way. Our journey to there started with advanced biofuels, and that journey through sustainable aviation fuel has taken us to the development of clean hydrogen technologies. We've got very large projects under development in that area. And so what we try to be is a pioneer and frontier pusher in the clean energy world.
That's beautiful. So, planes, they pollute a lot, right? And people don't realize how many planes are in the air at a given time. The last statistic that I heard is that airplanes, like there's at least 2,000 airplanes on the United States airfield at any minute during the day.
Yeah, it's a real miracle that human beings have figured out how to fly. Now we have to figure out how to fly in a more sustainable way. I know there's a big push to fly less, and I think that's a good thing. I think over time, as we become more aware of our personal behaviors and how they impact the species more collectively, we'll hopefully become a little less frivolous. But humans are going to fly. And we are not going to ever go back to just a land-based activity. So now we have to figure out how to do it in a less impactful way.
Well, you're completely right, Gene. When I started my business back in 2005, one of the reasons why I got inspired to run my own company is because I had a lot of training flying to different spots. So I was responsible for all the technology in the software side for the largest laboratory in Canada. So that had me flying from coast to coast almost every month. So I learned how to fly, and I developed the habit of traveling, and I loved it. So one of the things that I wanted to do is, how can I make a business that allows me to actually be in the air? And I remember several years later, I kind of regretted that decision because I was flying way too much, but Imagine the ability to go on a plane. It's incredible. So I had to go see a client in Argentina, and I didn't have any time. So I told my wife, I'm going to need the weekend to do this. I live in Toronto, right? So that's a 15-hour flight nonstop. They don't do that anymore. They took off that leg, but back then you could do it 15, 16-hour like direct flight.
I've done it, actually.
You've done it, right?
Yeah.
So I told my wife, listen, I have to go. I'm going to take the weekend, but if you guys want to come, you can come with me, and my older daughter can come with me. You guys can hang out while I do business. So we left on a Thursday. We took the red-eye flight. I landed there on Friday, went to the hotel, showered, got dressed, went to my meeting on Friday, and then we flew back on Monday. And I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe that I could actually go to the other end of the continent, the entire continent, the other end of the world, in 3-4 days, do my business, have some fun on the weekend, and go be back in Toronto on Monday.
It is such a miracle, isn't it? That human beings have figured out how to congregate this way. I was just at COP28 in Dubai, the annual meeting of representatives from all over the world to work on climate change related issues. It's a UN conference. It's super important. But the great irony of it is that we are flying in from every corner of the planet to congregate. There are 80,000 of us to congregate to work on climate change. Well, it's kind of ironic, isn't it, that we're all flying to go in to work on this problem in a pretty carbon intensive way. So I contemplated that irony a bit. So what's the alternative? We get work done when we're together, face to face. We connect when we're personally face to face. You and I are doing this by video, and it's good. It certainly beats the alternative, but it's not the same as actually having a cup of coffee together, right? And so human beings need to connect, and aviation has really created this unbelievable reality in which we can do that, where you could take your wife and daughter for the weekend to Buenos Aires from Toronto. I mean, it's mind-blowing, right? You go back 3 generations and have that discussion with someone that's what you were going to do, and they think you're nuts. So yeah, it's pretty incredible stuff.
And it's not that far back in time, and that's what, one of the reasons why I made this podcast is to teach the new generations, the younger entrepreneurs, the younger business leaders that perhaps they were born with an iPad in their hand or with a mouse in their hand. It doesn't take back. I was watching some videos that they recovered from the early 1900s, and the first cars were so slow, and to go from like a 200-mile trip would have taken 3 days just to get there.
That's amazing.
You go by horse.
And those first cars were 50 years after the Industrial Revolution, which before that you had average lifespans of 45 years. You had the vast majority of humans roaming the earth were in agrarian type of activities. You had poverty rates pre-industrial revolution approaching 50%. And so that time period to these really slow cars you're talking about, well, there was immense progress between those really slow cars of the early 20th century and even 100 years before that. Now in 2023, the rate of change, wow, it's crazy. 2023 was the year of AI and all that's going to come from AI, and it was the hottest year on record in 2023. We had the hottest day ever recorded on July 6th, 2023. We had the hottest month, July of 2023. And then we set records for hottest August, September, October, November, and December ever in 2023. So, we're on the cusp of 2024 and all the promise that comes with a new year. And we're just in this accelerating period of change that is just in one way extremely exciting. But it comes with an awful lot of obligation. And for me, part of that obligation is to figure out how to progress in a way that does that allows the species to continue to flourish. Because if we continue to get hotter and hotter and hotter, which we're going to do, we're going to be living in a hotter and hotter environment. Ultimately, this is a zero-sum game. We have to fix this problem.
Yeah, and it's incredible that there's people dedicated to fix the errors of our older generations, right? But we are just as guilty as charged, right? Like we have this this way of life, and we love our freedom, but we also have to take some responsibility, right? Like for me, in 2023, I promised my wife that I will never do a travel on business anymore for one whole year, and I finished the year. In November 2023. So I stopped traveling for business in 2022 in November. I went to I went to Phoenix for my last conference, and I said, if people want to talk to me, I will do Skype, and or I will do whatever it is, right? Zoom or whatever technology. And if they don't like that, well, that's okay with me, And so I did 3 business trips, not trips, but I did 3 trips related to family and faith, not related to business. And so I went from like 50 flights a year down to maybe 3, 4 flights.
That's interesting. And how'd the experiment go?
My company grew. Everybody was okay. I was told them what I was doing. I mean, climate change wasn't necessarily the primary reason. It was more getting back together with my wife and my family. But that has a carbon impact. When you take responsibility on what flights you need to take. I mean, there is. We're just talking about aviation, and also we don't have to be like, we have to be conscious that it's not only that, right? Like that's just a tiny % of the pollution, right? Like everything pollutes, right? What's mind blowing to me, for example, is, when you talk to organizations, and this is just my point of view, right? That's why I love this podcast. We can discuss with intelligent people like, but I talk to organizations, and they seem to start, giving proactive advice on how to better the environment. But then the technologies that are actually helping keep the environment clean, they start going against them because of the other probable dangers about it. And then they turn back to stuff that was 100 times worse. So my point is, where I live in Ontario, we're 99.9% energy clean. Why? Because we have a big nuclear power plant that is very well maintained with the highest standards in the world and has never given us problems. So all our electricity, all our energy is clean. So if you have an electric car in Ontario, you are completely clean. Now what happened in Germany? Because of the environmentalists that didn't believe in nuclear, they went in and they convinced the government to shut down their nuclear plants, and they are burning coal again. Like, they are polluting massively the environment again. And then the war happens, right? The war happens with Russia, and they get their gas cut off, and now they're in a horrible situation.
Yeah. It's a tough one. We've got what's called by the game theorists is the tragedy of the commons, right? Where we have a collective outcome based on our individual contributions. So one place after another doesn't want the local impact of the greater collective good, and so those fighting in the name of the environment often are fighting in the name of a local environment as opposed to a collective global environment, and there's certainly tension between those two for sure, right? But I don't know that I know enough to tell the Germans how they ought to run their country, but it certainly was pretty stunning that they were shutting down their carbon-free nuclear power plants as they were being shut off from their carbon-intensive natural gas from Russia.
It's interesting, right? And we can talk the whole podcast about this. I don't want to use too much time about that because it's a rabbit hole that everybody has opinions, right. And I'm not in charge of any of that, so I can only say my opinion with humbleness because I don't really know what's going on, right?
Yeah,
but you are there. How do you make more sustainable fuel for aviation?
So we've been in the biofuels business for now going on 26 years, and sustainable aviation fuel is made in a modified oil refinery. Ours is in Los Angeles, and we use a process that is akin to oil refining, using renewable inputs like used cooking oil or vegetable oil or animal fats. So these are renewable inputs, not crude oil, that we use as the basis for creating fuels that are dramatically lowering carbon impact, as much as 90% reduced carbon out of the fuels.
90% reduction.
Yeah, a lot of people don't understand that.
Wow.
That in fuel, the biggest impact of the fuel is not the carbon that's coming out of the tailpipe, but it's all the life cycle emissions that are associated with poking holes in the ground, pulling crude oil from the ground, moving that crude oil to a place where it can be refined, moving that fuel further to where it can be consumed, and then emit the fuel back, release the carbon back into the atmosphere. But each step along the way, the refining process, the discovery process, the extraction process, all of them, the transportation, all of it, they all have their carbon impacts. And so the fuel that we make has a much lower carbon impact. And while they're growing, whether it's plant or animal based, they're actually consuming carbon along the way. So the life cycle of the fuels we make are much lower carbon intensity.
That's beautiful, Gene. Listen, I usually try to respect your time because, like we only have 45 minutes booked.
Yeah.
But you know what I usually do when I have people with so much intelligence as you have, I would like to call you to another podcast because I have 1,000 questions and I want to cover so much. For example, I want to get into a clean hydrogen energy, right? But today, let's focus more on your life experience, on how you got here. And if you're willing, I'll get you back into another podcast to go more deeper into that technology because it's fascinating.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Gene, quick question. Let's go back 30 years ago. Where were you? What was in your mind and what did you want to do with your life?
30 years ago, let's see, that was 1994, I guess, was we were just starting a new year. I was just about ready to go into graduate school. I had started off my career as a city planner, and then I became an economic development official in the state that I live in Massachusetts. And I was about to go back to graduate school, and I had big ideas about how we live and the nature of our built environment and how public policy and business could lead to better quality of life for how people live their lives. So I would have to say I was a pretty idealistic young man. I guess I wasn't that young at the time, but kind of just starting off on my trajectory.
That's beautiful. How long did you take to graduate from grad school?
So I graduated a couple years later.
Wow. And what did you do after that?
So I took a job right before I went in. I had met somebody, an early entrepreneur in the development of biodiesel. That person was starting. His name is Jim Ritchie. He started one of the first advanced biofuels businesses in the United States. Actually, the first. And coming out of graduate school, I was very intrigued with what he was doing. This was in the kind of just a few years after the first Gulf War. It was very clear that the human addiction to oil had its significant externalities, let's call it. But human beings were going to have to break that addiction to oil, and that was clear to me. It's clear to everybody. It's not about becoming aware of the problem. It's about developing a solution. And so I was really intrigued by this idea that we could develop cleaner alternatives to fossil-based fuels. And so I joined this business in 1996. Almost immediately upon joining it, I thought there was a better way to approach the task at hand, and then I spun off a new business called World Energy out of that original business in 1998.
That's beautiful. To take that leap of faith is very hard, especially in a new industry, because that industry was just being developed.
Yeah.
How did you take that leap of faith? How do you say to yourself, or maybe, I don't know if you were married already or not, like, how do you actually say, okay, I'm going to venture this because I know how I can do it much better?
Well, I think, I've heard this said many times, and I certainly agree. You need to be a bit naive. You really can't do the standard risk-reward analysis and weigh all the alternatives and arrive at the decision that you're going to go start not only a new business, but a new industry, an industry that doesn't exist.
Mm-hmm.
So I knew the problem existed. I knew there had to be, begin to be answers to the problem. But how do you go build a business that can make a payroll on Friday out of that? And so the fundamental thesis was, and the reason that I launched World Energy was, look, this is better for society, but society is not paying for the benefits that the fuels that we were going to be developing offered. And so if you needed societal benefit, you needed societal contribution. So we either needed mandates or subsidies, but some form of public support. So in that time period between 1996 and 1998, is very focused on using the agricultural power that exists in the U.S. Lobbying community to establish public policy components that would give the business a reason to exist. And so once we had those in place, I saw an opportunity to build a business around solving a problem that the regulated entities, these are fleets, were going to, that they had, and we now had a solution that could address their problem. So ultimately, any business is going to have to identify a problem and provide a solution.
Mm-hmm.
Ours just happened to be a solution that addressed a problem that came out of regulatory changes.
That is amazing, because then you had the power to influence government so that you could actually get the opportunity to build the solution for a problem. That's what I tell people, I tell people, if we had no problems, there will be no entrepreneurs and no companies and no free world. The free world is based on solving problems.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I remember when I was younger, I was thinking, gee, most of the problems are solved, right? Like, we already have cars, we have televisions, we have all this advanced, this is quite some time ago, now have personal computers. How can I remember thinking, well, my IBM 386 machine is fine. Why do I need a faster machine? Why do I need more memory? Well, you don't know the problems you have until you have a solution to the problem that you didn't even know you had. Right. And so identifying problems and identifying potential solutions to problems, it's all what progress is about. Right.
As I was saying before we had the hiccup, the free world is built on companies that are fixing problems. But if you see the progress of humankind, because it's incredible how we actually got into this. The progress of humankind is based on the free world's ability to grab an innovation that was built before and make it better.
Yep.
And it's as simple as people riding horses, right? People riding horses, they innovated and they learned how to train an animal to enable us to move from point A to point B. Then somebody saw that and they saw that it was inefficient, and we invented the car. But before that, we invented the bicycle, right? So it was a progressive solving of a problem that became better and better for humankind. And
that is how change happens. It's incremental in nature, right? We tend to think, oh, well, if we just research a problem long enough, we will find solutions. Well, no, the solutions to problems happen when you do what you can do today, so that you can do what you have to do tomorrow. So you do one bit after another, after another, after another, after another. When we decided to put a man on the moon long before we had the technology to put a man on the moon. We just made the goal and then had to perfect computer technology to the point where we could put a man on the moon. Now, when I say perfect as of 1960s level computer technology, right? So obviously we've made immense change since then, but every step of the way, it's incremental change. It's not huge leap change, right? Everything builds stands on the shoulders that came before.
I'm amazed about that. as you may know, I'm a man of faith, so I got to my faith last year. I went out of the faith for 30 years, but last year I started to start reading the Bible. I started trying to make sense of what's going in the world because I'm a computer scientist. I have 2 degrees in computer science. I run 7 companies. 6 of them are in computer-based technologies, and one of them is real estate. And then I just looking back, when you start researching back into the world, right? So let's go back to the Industrial Revolution, for example, right? This fact is crazy. From like by the 1890 to 1900s, 95% of the workforce of the United States of America was hired by farms.
Yep.
Now it's 5%.
Yeah.
Now, how many more Americans do we have to feed? It's exponentially more. It's more than 350 million people. Back then, how much were they? Right. And we're talking 150 years ago. It's not a long time ago, right? And that's so. But the irony for me is we have, like, if you look at the technology chart, for 2,000 years we pretty much didn't do anything. Like if you look at from the time of Jesus Christ was on earth, all the way down to the 1800s. Honestly, like it was very little. Like we had a couple of geniuses that built a couple of things, but really we were farming, right? We were riding horses.
And it wasn't up until very recently. All of our lives were pretty similar to our parents' lives, and our kids' lives would be pretty similar to ours. It's only been, as you point out, it's only been in the post-industrial revolution world, which is a couple hundred years, right? Just a couple hundred years, not even a couple hundred years, which is nothing. That's 10% of the time going back to the time of Christ. And even the time of Christ till now is a blip. It's the tiniest blip in a universe that's been around 13.6 billion years. Right? And we hear billion and million and they sound kind of similar. No. They're not. They're not similar. They changed by only one letter, but the scale of this blows the mind, right? If you take the time of Christ till now, over the course of the history of the universe, and you try to track it to a day, that is like 1 second before midnight, if right now is midnight. Right?
Yeah, and that's why it's impossible for me not to have faith. Just the fact that you said that is like, the design reveals the designer, right? So if you go to a building and you see the building and say how beautiful it is, you can for sure know that somebody came up with that idea and came up with the design and the architecture to get it done. Same with the universe, same with us, right? Isn't it? It's incredible. And it just happened to me, this epiphany, when I got older, But, going back to our technology, right? So we are in an exponential growth in technology. Just myself, like, to give an example, I wrote a book last year. It became a bestseller on AI because I realized that there wasn't any books on AI that pretend to business and how to leverage AI on business. So I wrote it, and that's why it became very popular because there was like 3 books on Amazon about AI, and most of them were computer scientific. They were not business oriented. So I grabbed all my intelligence and all the research from my people, and I put it together. But if you look at the evolution of AI, like the concept of AI was created in the 60s. Like we already were imagining what artificial intelligence could do. But if you see the exponentiation of it, like for example, this podcast, right? My team that create this podcast, I have 3 different podcasts. This is my business podcast. I have a technology podcast and I have a faith-based podcast. I only employ 4 people to do these 3 podcasts. And this is one of the most popular podcasts out there already for business. You know why? Because we use AI. Like think about just the fact that we can talk on the screen. Like might as well be in Dubai right now. I mean, you're in Massachusetts, you're like a few hours away from me, but we are just creating this incredible content with the technology, and it's just
I'm with you on that, and I think this, I think there's real power in this podcasting thing, this phenomenon. Human beings do their best work when they're in conversation, when they're communicating, when they're when they're working things out together, right? And podcasting now not only allows you and I to be having this conversation, but allows other people to sit in on the conversation, right? And this is how we naturally communicate. This is sitting around a campfire. This is the normal way of how the species evolved to communicate. I think I'm just amazed at the power of audiobooks and how now we can have the power of reading while we're taking a walk in the woods, while we're driving to and from work, and we don't have to listen to the same repetitive nonsense, or we don't have to listen to, frankly, so much of the news today is just the churning through of irrelevant facts that have happened in the last 24 hours. But so much of it is out of context. It doesn't matter. Harari wrote this great book that you probably know of, Sapiens.
Yeah.
Terrific book, right? Strongly recommended. And I heard him on a podcast recently, and he was talking about how we need to, we all know that food companies have perfected the art of understanding how our tastes work and why they work and why we like salty foods and why we like sugary foods and what in our evolutionary biology wants us to do that. And therefore, we recognize that we have to control ourselves, because if we just eat the foods that our bodies want us to eat, it'll be very, very bad for us. But what the point he makes is we've got the same thing going with information. And now the AI, the algorithms that drive the news feeds that grab us and hold us are just like the junk food companies that are playing on our natural biological desires. And we just keep consuming the junk food of information over and over and over and over. And it keeps on confirming we like Trump, we don't like Trump, we did whatever. And it just keeps on feeding us. And we have to learn how to get on information diets. And I think if you're going to consume information, consume audiobooks. Consume long form podcasts. Consume something that's going to get into some depth, not just the repetition of kind of irrelevant noise that we're surrounded by.
Yeah, and you're right. And I call that the desires of the flesh.
Yeah.
And that's what it is. If you give in on what your body wants, you're going to end up dead pretty quick. That's where addictions come from. And especially health addictions, like mental addictions. You're completely right. Like, people discover the neurotransmitters talking about technology, right? Like in the last 50 years, we discovered neurotransmitters. We know hormones. We know what dopamine is. What serotonin is. We know the endocrine system, how exactly our human biology reacts to certain things. And now we have placed psychologists and neuroscientists behind technology to poke people on consume these things, right? But for financial benefit. And the problem with that is that, especially the newer generations, they are completely helpless. They don't know why they want this stuff. Like, it happened to me, Gene. Like, when TikTok came about, I didn't know what it was, because I have never been a big social media guy, but I downloaded it and tried it out. And it took like 2 months for me to start, like, I realized that I was flipping those videos for an hour without stopping, sitting down on a chair. I'm like, what a waste of my time. So last year, I deleted everything,
It turns out you're human too, right? We're all drawn to this stuff, right? Everybody is, right? It's not just kids. I chuckle a lot when, we've got to protect the kids from technology. We've got to protect everybody from technology.
Yeah.
Right? And we got to start with ourselves first. This isn't about protecting children. This is about, why don't we get a hold of ourselves first, and then maybe we will have some impact in others. But until you can get it together yourself, we all flip through. We all do it. It's just a human thing, and it's going to take a whole new form of discipline. I think much more discipline than even the the issues around flesh and the issues around food and other things that draw us in that are, that aren't healthy for us. We're going to need to get to a level of personal discipline around technology.
For sure.
Greater than anything that we've had to do before, because this technology just is fantastic at pulling us in and getting us to churn. And we waste our time.
Yeah.
We waste our time and we waste our energy. And we're all of us, me, you, everybody, are driven now more and more because of the algorithms by anger. Well, good things don't come out of anger.
No.
We can't. We're not drawn to inspiration. We're not drawn to learning. We're not drawn to positive change. We're drawn to the things that we're angry about. Yeah. That is what humans get drawn to. And if we're not careful, we miss out on all of the good stuff. The good stuff is learning. The good stuff is connecting.
Innovating, right?
Innovating, contributing. Right? You know what? You want value in your life? Give something, deliver something, do something, be of use, add some value. Whatever value. Help somebody cross the street, whatever.
And it's beautiful that we talk about these things, Gene, because I think it starts with education. So I tell you why we're drawn to anger. We're drawn to anger because the feeling of fear is the strongest feeling in our biology, because it's the feeling that is responsible. The amygdala is the one that produces that neurotransmitter that gives you fear, and it gives you a shock in your body of alarms, because it's responsible for your survival.
Yes.
So when you get into anger, it's because you already got offended and you think that unconsciously you think you're gonna die, and that's why you react with anger. And it's horrible because it blinds you, right? It has been scientifically proven that when you get angry, when you have a flush of neurotransmitters in your brain that creates all kinds of hormones, it blocks it blocks your frontal cortex. So your computer ability, your decision ability, your logical ability gets shut down, because the body is on flight or fight, so it doesn't have enough energy to attend to the brain, which is the most consuming energy organ in your body. So you go right into this, you think you're doing right, and all people are doing is playing puppets with you.
Yeah.
Isn't it crazy?
And it's not even people playing puppets. It's the algorithm that's playing puppets.
Well, developed by people, though, right? Because
they're owned by people, but they are run by. And as you know, you just wrote a bestseller on AI.
Right.
There's no person behind the AI. The AI is trained in a way it goes, and so it's increasingly a machine that is the puppet master.
Yeah, just remember that we put the algorithms there, and we employ the best scientists to know how our brain works, but we don't tell people that. So all the AI can do is self-learn based on the data that it receives, and the data has been there in the internet for decades.
Yeah, of course, right.
So the worst part about AI is that if you don't control it, it's gonna keep doing what you tell it to do. It's gonna be increasingly better every single day because it's exponentially better.
Yeah, of course, and in ways that are super powerful and super helpful.
Yeah,
but also threatening. Right?
It's like a knife, right, Gene? It's like a knife. You can use a knife to cut your food or to kill somebody. Yeah. It's a tool, right?
Yeah. It's true. It's true.
So, Gene, it's been past 45 minutes. I thank you so much for your time. I don't want to abuse it. We haven't talked anything about your life experience and how you actually managed to grow that company.
We were philosophizing, but we didn't really get into anything about
and I love it. So I will for sure cordially invite you to a second episode to have a second round of these beautiful conversations. That's why I made this podcast, Gene. Like, I've been blessed financially to the point that I'm financially independent. I don't run my businesses. I have people that run those businesses so that I can just give advice. So I dedicated my life to provide quality information in the internet, to counter so that we have to have a good force against this evil force that is just producing all these horrible feelings, right? So I thank you because you are here because of that. You have a whole good heart.
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate the conversation and the opportunity. I do think, as I just was saying, I do think we have the opportunity to go into longer formats and get into better discussions about more interesting things than just having the algorithms feed us whatever's, the brain candy. And so good for you for doing it. I think this is super powerful stuff. I think podcasts are going to have a meaningful impact on how humans get past the short-term information bursts that are currently controlling us. So listen, thanks. I've enjoyed the chat, and good for you for doing this work.
Thank you so much, Gene. God bless, and I'll see you in the second episode of this incredible episode. It was one of the most exciting episodes I've done.
Perfect. Well, thank you, David. I enjoyed it. Have a great rest of your day.
You too. God bless. Cheers.
Right, see you. Bye.
That's all for today's episode of the Break Free Podcast. Head on over to iTunes and subscribe to the show. Starting your own business can be tough, but it doesn't have to be. Visit davidmansilla.com to pick up a copy of the #1 international best-selling book, Breaking Out of Corporate Jail. Expand what you consider to be possible and reach your full potential. And join us on the next episode.